So right now I am in Abu Dhabi, which is very exciting to me because I've never been in the UAE before. The final destination of this trip is actually Indonesia. But since I'm going through here anyway, I decided to add a day in the city to check it out. And that is actually the really fun thing about layovers. I've been using layovers more and more in recent years to have little add-ons to my trips that allow you to see more countries and you won't waste additional time in transit, and usually you don't even have additional cost. I like to think of layovers as the ultimate itinerary enhancing travel hack. But many people are unaware of the special searches that you often have to do to find them and the amazing stopover deals that you can take advantage of. For example, on this layover in Abu Dhabi, I'm staying in this hotel entirely for free. Not because I'm an influencer or something, I'm not an influencer. This is something that anyone can get. If you're flying with Etihad and you're having a stopover in Abu Dhabi, this place I'm staying for 2 nights normally costs 90 euros a night. A lot of airlines also make it so that if you book your layover in a certain way, it won't cost more than a normal return ticket. First, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Tortuga backpacks. They make carry-on backpacks that I really love using. On this trip, I've got the Tortuga Backpack Lite. There's also a Tortuga Backpack Pro that I've used previously. Both are excellent carry-on backpacks that are great for the kinds of travel that I like to do. You can check out all of their travel gear at tortugabackpacks.com, and if you go to tortugabackpacks.com/indie, you can get 10% off your first purchase. So thank you, Tortuga, for making that offer available, and thank you for sponsoring this video. So how do you find layover opportunities? Well, you can start by using whatever flight search engine you use anyway. I'm using Google Flights here, and I'm gonna do a trip from Lisbon to Tbilisi in Georgia, which is a trip I took a few years ago. And if you search, you might already find something interesting. For example, here is a layover. We can go to Tbilisi via Athens and then stay there for more than a day, which is cool. But these kinds of options don't show up very often. Most of the options are either direct or, as you can see here, they're just quick stopovers, not enough to really do much in the layover destination. So we want more control over the dates. So here's a Turkish Airlines option, and if we go to the website, we may be able to play with the dates a little bit more. Okay, so here we should not use the round-trip search or the one-way search the way you might be accustomed to. Definitely don't try to book one-way tickets because that's going to be more expensive than a round trip and you're going to run into all kinds of practical issues with that. What we want is the multi-city or multi-stop search, because here we can enter each leg of the journey separately, which will give us control over the dates. Okay, so I've done that and I've chosen to at least have one full day in the layover destination. I like to do that. Probably it will be a bit more than that depending on the departure times of these flights, but that will give us some time in the layover, and then the rest of the trip will just be, all the days spent in Georgia, my final destination. And then you can start to select the specific flights. I have to say the multi-stop searches are sometimes a bit annoying, I think because they don't give as much developer attention to these parts of the websites of airlines. For example, with Etihad, I had to fill out all the details every time again when I wanted to find another option. There was no way to just hit the back button and, change the date or something. You had to manually enter it every time. I've had some other issues with other multi-stop searches, with Turkish Airlines, for example. So they can be a bit of a pain to search for, but once you have an option that lets you, add 24 hours in a place or 36 hours or whatever you want, you can book that as a normal return. So then, how do you get a free hotel? Well, it's only in a few specific places where you can do this, but it's worth checking the layover page of the airline you're flying with, because generally they have information specifically for these types of trips. Now, with some airlines, you can email their kind of travel agent, their internal travel agent, and give them your flight details. They'll generally give you a list, and then you choose from that list which ones you prefer, and then from the 3 that you prefer, they'll book you one hotel that they choose. That's generally how it goes, and the kinds of hotels that are available will depend on which class you're flying. In some places, it's not free hotels. It might be, for instance, Singapore Airlines offers a free tour of Singapore if you're on a layover. Etihad does free hotels. Turkish Airlines, Ethiopian Airlines, Qatar Airlines has discounted hotels. Emirates, China Southern. Those are ones at the moment that offer this kind of thing. A lot of them are kind of in the Middle East or, between Europe and Asia. So the first advantage really is to go to places that maybe ordinarily wouldn't be top of your travel list, but you wouldn't mind checking out. And you can check out a country in a kind of a try before you buy way. It can be a preview, perhaps for a future trip. This was the case for me with Istanbul a few years ago. I was traveling to Georgia, the country, and at the time I used a similar deal as the one that I used here, where I got a free hotel. So I stayed for 2 nights in Istanbul. It was my first time in this city, and I loved it. Even if you have like 24 hours available, it doesn't matter. You can have a great experience in Istanbul. I was able to see the Hagia Sophia, the Great Bazaar, the ancient cisterns. Another reason, which is kind of similar to what I've just said, but more from a practical point of view, some countries can be annoying to plan a trip to. Getting a China visa normally is a bit annoying because you have to pre-plan your trip and you have to say where you're going to be going and staying. And I believe it's still true that you need an invitation letter. So it's something you have to think about and plan. Whereas the stayover or layover visas for China are very easy to get. They are just visa on arrivals that last for a maximum of 5 days. The variety that it gave to my trip was really crazy because I was spending time on some Cambodian islands with beautiful tropical waters. Spent New Year's Eve there. It was an amazing experience. Had campfires on the beach, that kind of thing. Then I went to Bangkok. I flew to Beijing, and suddenly my face was just blasted with ice cold air because it was in the middle of winter and there were people ice skating in the park. I was buying hot chocolates and hot teas, not even to drink at one point, but just to warm up my hands. I was using every layer I had for clothing. And that's such a cool contrast, which if you've ever done a round the world trip where you go from continent to continent around the world, you'll know what that is like because that will happen a lot on a trip like that. You go from one climate to the opposite climate. You can have a mini version of that with a layover. There's also islands in the middle of oceans that can be really good for this. Iceland is a great example of this. If you're traveling between the US and Europe, then Iceland is kind of on the way. And that's actually how Iceland became big as a tourist destination, because a lot of people would go to Reykjavik, check it out, and then resume their journey. And the airlines that go through Iceland, they make it easy for you to do this. Another great example that I really like is the Azores. I love the Azores, and if you fly with the national carrier of Portugal, they won't give you something for free necessarily, but they will make it so that you can add, I think, a maximum of 3 days to your time on the islands without this affecting the airfare. So when you're going somewhere, it's always cool to look at the map of the world and see what is on the way and how you maybe could include some other place. I hope you find these tips useful, and if you want to have more tips like this, check out my book, Travel the World Without Worries, which is now in its 4th edition. If you go to noworriestravel.co, you can get the first chapter for free. I talk about a lot of travel ideas in the book, ways of moving the puzzle pieces of your trip around so that you can have a more epic trip or that you have more space for spontaneous adventures. All my best travel tips are in this guide. So check out Travel the World Without Worries if you want to have more ideas, more tips for planning your itineraries.